Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's program. This lecture has been selected to be recorded for Chicago Amplified, a web-based audio program produced by WBEZ Chicago that captures some of the most exciting and informative cultural programming in the Chicago area. In your printed program, you'll find out more about how you can hear this lecture again or share it with others through Chicago Amplified. At this time, I'd like to ask that you please make sure your cell phones are turned off. And now I'd like to introduce our chaplain, the Reverend H. Scott Matheny. Thank you.
What an evening we have planned, and what a moment this is for the life of this college. It is a joy to have you all here, and thank you all for coming. There is a sense of moving beyond old prejudices into new possibilities, where we begin to say we become aware of others' needs. These were the words that our president, Dr. Alan Ray, used with me as we talked in our last meeting about how to help this college in the significance of this celebrative time and what we do here this evening. So it's a joy to have you all here, especially a joy to have so many alums back and to see you here with all the beauty and to have this moment that comes to this time. It is this moment and this time that we recognize that I ask you to note with great pride the fact that this night has had many people to bring it to fruition throughout the years, many people. But under the leadership of President Ray, he has singularly moved us to this night. It was he who came to me and said, "Tell me the strengths of this name," in Bill Johnson, and took that to his cabinet and spoke with a number of people. And so it's his leadership that we thank especially this evening, along with our beloved Bill. Will you join me as we start this evening with words of welcome and the framing of this night with the 13th president of this college, Dr. S. Alan Ray. Sir?
Thank you, Scott. Welcome, everyone. It's a great crowd of people assembled tonight. And it's my pleasure to make a few welcoming and opening remarks. We come here this evening to celebrate the life and the work of the Reverend Dr. William R. Johnson, class of 1968, better known to many as Bill Johnson. At his ordination in 1972, Bill became the first openly gay person in modern history to gain ordination to the mainstream Christian ministry. Bill currently serves as Vice President for Member Relations at the Council for Health and Human Service Ministries of the United Church of Christ. Perhaps you first got acquainted with Bill through his ministry, or perhaps more recently through the pages of the college's Prospect magazine, which told Bill's inspiring story in detail last year, a copy of which is on your seat. In either case, you know that in his professional life, Bill has worked tirelessly for 4 decades and more on behalf of the rights and the dignity of all people, and in particular LGBT people of faith and their loved ones. The way forward was not and is not easy for him. Even the UCC, which takes justifiable pride in ordaining the first woman and the first African American to ministry in a mainstream church, had difficulty at first accepting Bill for the proud gay Christian he is. But in time, Bill's charisms became obvious, and he has become a leader in ministry and a role model for many far beyond the United Church of Christ. Elmhurst College is very proud of our engagement with LGBT issues and our support of LGBT students. I see a day when this campus extends the UCC's tradition of extravagant welcome to persons of all sexual orientations, who will share the richness of their experiences with one another, so that they might become, in the words of our 6th president, theologian H. Richard Niebuhr, effective individuals in society and the world. We've already taken steps in this direction, as many of you know, by inviting prospective students to indicate whether they identify with the LGBT community. This invitation to what is a wholly voluntary act on their part will help us better serve this segment of our student body, will increase the meaningful diversity of the campus and will send, and this is very important to me, a signal of welcome to LGBT high school students everywhere, a signal that is so often lacking, surprisingly, in the world they are about to enter. You may notice the editorial on your seats as well in the Chronicle for Higher Education. As proof positive that we are indeed ahead of all the rest, you'll notice the date on that article is October 14th. Today's the 11th. Apparently, those neutrinos have nothing on us. So tonight, we take another step. I'm happy to celebrate with you the inaugural William R. Johnson Guestship. And at this time, it's my pleasure to invite Bill Johnson to join me on the platform to receive your welcome and thanks for his lifetime of service and achievement. Bill? The plaque I'm holding reads as follows. Elmhurst College, on the occasion of the inaugural annual William R. Johnson Guestship, October 11, 2011, National Coming Out Day. Annually, the college will host preeminent guests to address matters related to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and straight identities to further the causes of justice and peace in society. This guestship is named for one of Elmhurst's alumni, William R. Johnson, class of 1968, whose life exemplifies the cause of liberation and equality. May the William R. Johnson Guestship serve as a beacon of hope for future generations of Elmhurst College students, faculty, and staff, and strengthen this college's path toward greater light and justice in the tradition of its shared values with the United Church of Christ. Bill, it's my pleasure to give you this token. Nice. It's a photo opportunity. Imagine Bill's delight. Limitless photography and now an open mic. Died and gone to heaven.
My mother has always told me, my mother, who's 101 years old now, has always told me that I always say whatever comes out of my mouth. And those who've already experienced me know that I can have things coming out of my mouth for quite some time. So I have made some prepared remarks. When I'm working in my home office each day, I see on the wall my degree from Elmhurst College. Above my desk, I see a framed postcard of Hammerschmidt Memorial Chapel and the Elmhurst College Alumni Merit Award that I received in 1992. I drink my morning coffee from my Elmhurst alumni mug, which sits on a trivet from homecoming in 1999, when what is now Curitan Hall was dedicated. You could say that I'm obsessed, but the truth is that I have an authentic affection for Elmhurst College, for what it was when I was a student here, and for what it has become in the decades since I graduated. So perhaps you'll understand when I say that even though I've known for several months about this singular honor, I am still struggling to get my head around the idea that my name will be associated with Elmhurst College in perpetuity through this guestship. I'm humbled and very grateful to President Alan Ray, who made the decision to name this important guestship in my honor. Alan, your leadership in affirming the college's relationship with the United Church of Christ and in strengthening the college's commitment to inclusion is exemplary. And I know that in time, college administrators across the country will see the wisdom of following your lead. You make me even more proud to say that I am a graduate of Elmhurst College. I want to thank Chaplain Scott Matheny, who early on understood the importance of encouraging campus dialogue about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender history and culture. I'm grateful to President Reese Potterveld of Pacific School of Religion and President Alice Hunt of Chicago Theological Seminary for being here and for sharing your wisdom tonight. Your presence and the presence of many good friends in the audience makes this exciting occasion very special for me. Even more exciting is the potential for the William R. Johnson Guestship. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender history is replete with spellbinding stories, dramatic events, and inspiring personalities. We will hear about one of them tomorrow when Michael Schiavi gives the inaugural lecture about the life and work of my beloved friend Vito Russo. I've heard Michael's presentation, and I can tell you it is not to be missed. 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in this space. Please indulge me for a moment as I mention another inspiring life, that of the late Salvador J. Licata, Elmhurst College class of 1961, whose graduate studies at the University of Southern California earned him the first PhD in history ever awarded for gay studies. Sal and I were best of friends, and I know that were he here, he would be beaming from ear to ear. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender culture has had a positive impact on so many aspects of global human society, from the arts to industry, to religion, to social service, to the military. Same-gender loving and gender-identified people have made groundbreaking contributions that have been largely ignored or gone unacknowledged by the majority society. Consequently, this LGBT guestship has tremendous potential to be one of the most challenging and vital learning experiences offered by Elmhurst College to both the campus and to the wider community. I strive to be an authentic, faithful, just, and compassionate servant leader, doing what I can for the common good. Much of my inspiration comes from my days at Elmhurst, the lessons I learned here, the friends that I made. This annual guestship will always be a source of pride for me. May the lecture always inspire and challenge the audience to name and devalue heterosexism, homophobia, silencing, and invisibility. May it help bring an end to ignorance and fear about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, so that all people may not only experience welcome and find safety here, but encouragement to grow into the socially conscious, spiritually centered, truly ethical leaders that Elmhurst College has always counted among its graduates. Thank you. May God bless us all.
At this time, I'm happy to inform you that the faculty have a special announcement to make, and I invite to the podium Dr. Diane Chambers, professor in the English department.
Well, my opening line was going to be to introduce myself. This is I won't go into any details since this is a rather broad based audience, but just to say, a few weeks ago as faculty were thinking about all of the press and the debate about the changes in our admission form, a number of us approached the college doing what faculty always do, asking for some funding. Specifically, we were asking for funding, grants for developing curriculum, continuing to develop curriculum, and continuing to develop materials to support LGBT study at the college. I'm pleased to report that the college has responded very positively and generously to our request and has dedicated funding for a number of small and large grants, some workshops to help faculty develop more courses in this area, and also some money to continue to acquire material in the library. But for faculty who are here, you will have a chance to apply to these grants in the spring. I'd just like to finish by thanking the college for giving the faculty an opportunity to support LGBT study in the way that faculty best can through our curriculum. So, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. So, to keep us moving and to lift our spirits, we had the joy of, in my tenure, knowing some amazing young men and women who have been a part of the life of this college by virtue of music. Kristen Castiello and Perry Simmons are two of our fabulous graduates who are now part of Chicago Gay Men's Chorus. And we wanted to have some music to this evening's life because Bill's a singer, sings in the Cleveland Gay Men's Chorus, at least at one point, sings in his choir, and so we had to have some music. And so will you join me as two of our great alums come on up to offer a song to get us going into the next part of the evening, please. Let us give thanks for Chris and Perry.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Live in my house, I'll be your shelter. Just pay me back with 1,000 kisses. Be my lover, and I'll cover you.
Open your door, I'll be your tenant. Don't got much baggage to lay at your feet. Sweet kisses I've got to spare. I'll be there and I'll cover you. I think they meant it when they said you can buy love. Now I know you can rent it. At least you are my love. On life, be my life. Just let me on, I'll be your blanket. Wherever, whatever, I'll be your coat. You'll be my king, and I'll be your castle. Oh, you'll be my queen, and I'll be your moat. I think they meant it when they said you can buy love. Now I know you can rent it. At least you were my love. On life, be my life. I've longed to discover something as true as this is. Oh, with 1,000 sweet kisses.
You're cold and you're lonely.
With 1,000 sweet kisses.
I want to go only
you.
with 1,000 sweet kisses.
Worn out and tired.
1,000 sweet kisses.
Expire. Oh,
Thank you, Chris and Perry. You guys are great. Good to have you back, too. Pleasure. There are some people I want to make sure you all know about as we get ready to come to the moment where we have a formal conversation. In the class of 1971, who is now the president of the Council of Health and Human Services for the United Church of Christ, Brian Sickberg, could you please stand, sir, and be received. Thank you for coming, Brian. It's good to have you here. I would ask also if Andy Lang, where are you, Andy? The executive director for the Coalition, national staff, and runs the Coalition, or LGBT Concerns for the United Church of Christ. Thank you, sir, for coming in today from Cleveland. It's great to have you here. The president of what was called SAGE, our Straights and Gays for Equality, is here, and they have changed their name to Equal, Elmhurst Queers and Allies. And Emily, will you at least stand so we can say congratulations to a great student groups. It's good to have you here, and we got a lot of students from that. Thank you all for coming out. And tomorrow, Bill mentioned the fact that the person that will come and give the first guestship under the Johnson name, when I first met Michael Schiavi in his office this summer, it was amazing just that half-hour exchange. And to be able to listen to you and to hear then from what Bill talks about. Thank you so much, sir, for coming in from New York. Will you please stand and be recognized? We are honored to have you here tonight. Thank you. Michael's going to be meeting tomorrow morning with students at 10:30 and then also at 1 o'clock. So there's plenty of opportunities tomorrow for our students to have a chance to sit with him. I invite you all to think about why this night is so important. President Ray has framed it well under the context of National Coming Out Day to have the guestship that will be named and started tomorrow. And to then turn to why the school, in its core values, reached out to two distinguished presidents to sit with the college's president, our president, and to think together about what is 40 years almost to the eve of when Bill was ordained in 1972, and what this institution stands for and where it needs to go, a seminary in Berkeley that took him in, a president of another seminary that we are deeply connected to and love, and to frame that night that would take care of this whole community and offer the best that this college has and what it hopes to become. And so we turn to Reese Potterville, who is the president of Pacific School of Religion. And you see in his biography a commanding history, someone who has been deeply involved in presidency of two institutions, but many more, a person who has been deeply committed to the LGBT concerns, as you see in his program. His scholarship, for those of us who study in this area, we call it contextual or process theology. And that work has exemplified itself in transformational leadership of not-for-profit organizations beyond the church and seminaries. He has actually started 4 not-for-profit organizations under his leadership. We turn to him because Bill went to that seminary, but also because of the relationship that we look forward to. We have one of our best graduates in Emily Lebrecht out there studying with you right now, sir. Will you all join me in welcoming Dr. Potterville to the podium, please? Come on up. Some of you were here at graduation last May. The college awarded its highest medal, an honorary doctorate, to the Reverend Dr. Alice Hunt. Some of you know that she is ordained, as is Reese in the United Church of Christ. Alice is ordained, however, in a church that you'll see in the program. It's an important historical church. It's out of what we in the church call the historic black church tradition. How did this white woman get in that church? It's a great story of how she became a part of the life of her scholarship, biblical studies, that talks about immigration issues, that also talks about how to think theologically and take young minds and help them become agents of theological reflection and action. We are deeply honored to have this wonderful friend of the college and commanding scholar and presence in the nation. Will you join me in welcoming Alice Hunt? Madame. And last but certainly not least, we know our beloved president, Dr. Ray, in his 4th year, and you see in his academic background and work studies and scholarship and leadership. I would like you also to note that his doctoral dissertation was on the impact of the work of the philosopher Michel Foucault for doing theological work and framing theology today. We have seen him through many stages of help to bring this college to a new place, and he has given tirelessly to the question that I posed him in the interview process, that I would hope the next president would learn to love this college and have a fight with it and love it. And he has done that. He loves this institution. And for that, we're extremely thankful. Will you join me in welcoming our president, Dr. Ray, please? And the evening goes as such. Dr. Ray will get us into the next stage, and with pleasure, enjoy the night.
Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge several people and ask them, when I'm finished, all collectively if they would stand for your recognition. These are people that have been very important in bringing us to this moment, and very important in moving forward the college as an institution that seeks to live out its core value as it applies to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons. Please acknowledge the prime mover and the catalyst behind our application decision. That is our Dean of Admission, Gary Rold. I'd like to also acknowledge our Dean of Students, Eileen Sullivan, and her crew, any in attendance. I know they have worked tirelessly to help our students come to this moment. I'd also like to thank Reverend Matheny. Scott has also worked tirelessly to bring us together, to raise up the issues and to keep them before us that are so important to what we celebrate tonight. And finally, I know you'll join me in welcoming the members of former SAGE, now Equal, students from which I have learned many things regarding the representation of difference on a campus that is infused with love, care, and concern. Those students, now members and leaders of Equal, or alumni and alumni. May I ask those people that I've just called on, please stand, acknowledge, and look at these people. Thank you. All those folks, please rise. Thank you. To get us going, I want to offer just a very brief framing of what unites this group tonight. We set about thinking how could we, from our respective disciplinary perspectives and institutional commitments, speak to the moment. And as I thought about this, the role of biblical scholarship cannot be underestimated in how we think seriously about issues regarding sexuality. Also, it's impossible to conceive of a conversation around these issues in a religious context without reflection from a more sociological or theological perspective. And finally, I felt that it was important to have a larger social context and historical or legal context in which all these conversations take place. Hence, we have the three of us to offer those comments this evening. So to get us going, I invite President Hunt to offer her remarks regarding the biblical background regarding LGBT people. Alice.
Thank you, President Ray. Good evening. Good evening. Okay, it's not a National Baptist church, so I won't make you do that again. Being here tonight, honoring the life and work of this amazing man gives me pause to marvel at what can happen at the voice, integrity, and action of one person. I know, President Ray, you must be so very proud of this alum of Elmhurst College. And I see all the alumni who are here, and I see students here who will be alums, and I can't help but wonder how this world is going to be such a better place because of your voice and your integrity and your action. What about that? What will our future look like? So, one of the reasons I got into biblical studies was because of how people misuse the Bible, how the Bible has been used to abuse people. Just think about some of the cases. The Bible has been misused to execute women as witches. The Bible has been misused to persecute Jews and other non-Christian persons of faith. The Bible has been misused to oppose interracial marriage. It has been misused to support the KKK, Hitler's Third Reich, the Spanish Inquisition, the oppression of women, domestic violence, apartheid, slavery, segregation. We are no strangers to the misuse of the Bible. And with regard to LGBTQ persons, the abuse continues in some circles. I sometimes hear people say, holding up their Bible, the Bible says homosexuality is a sin. The Bible says marriage is between one man and one woman. God says it, I believe it, that settles it. Well, not so fast. Do we really know what the Bible says? And even if we think we come to the point where we know what the Bible says, how do we know what it means? Is there a chance that our interpretation, your interpretation or mine, could be wrong? And then there are the funny things that we do when it comes to talking about Bible and human sexuality. For one thing, we choose to ignore many texts having to do with expressions of human sexuality. For example, Deuteronomy 22 says that if a bride is not a virgin, she must be stoned on the spot. Deuteronomy 22 also says adulterers should be put to death. Bible says that sex with a prostitute is okay for a man. And it says that polygamy is just fine. It says slavery and having sex with slaves is okay. And it's not just the Old Testament. Mark 10 says that divorce is forbidden. It also says that marrying a divorced person is forbidden. We ignore some biblical texts selectively. Other scriptures we interpret selectively. So we might say, well, that was for a different place and time, a different context. Take, for example, the holiness code found in Leviticus. It contains one of the 7 texts people use to talk about homosexuality in the Bible. Here are some of the things commanded by God in the holiness code. The people of God are to offer frequent peace offerings. When's the last time you offered a peace offering to God? People of God are to leave food for the poor and the traveler. People of God are not to work on the Sabbath. People of God, when they need light, are supposed to burn pure olive oil. People of God should not wear clothes that are made of mixed fabric. Oops. Men should not cut the hair from the sides of their head or cut their beards. No shaving. People of God should not eat pork or shrimp or lobster. These verses are interpreted in light of the place and time. and yet for some reason other verses are applicable today? So, when people are trying to use the Bible to speak against homosexuality, they use a very few verses and interpret them in the way they wish to interpret them. But I want to suggest to you tonight that the Bible is actually silent on homosexuality as we understand it today. Now, we don't have time this evening to go into a detailed analysis. I'll invite you to come take a class from Dr. Ken Stone, who's sitting back there, Homosexuality and Biblical Interpretation. Then you can go in the details. And we're just down in Hyde Park, so we'll welcome you there. Even he teaches it online if you want to take it online. But we don't have a long time to go through those, but 2 minutes only. I'll mention them briefly. Genesis 2, the second creation story, is sometimes used to say that sex is for procreation and homosexuals cannot procreate, so they should not be having sex. But that argument quickly dissolves when we think about how we regard heterosexual couples who are not able to have children, or heterosexual couples who are too old to have children, or who just choose not to have children. And then there's Genesis 19, the text about Sodom, often used to condemn homosexuality. But in fact, the Bible gives witness, as it often does, to what Genesis 19 is really all about. Jesus in Matthew 10, along with 5 of the Old Testament prophets, say clearly that the sin of Sodom was not homosexuality. It was hospitality. A lack of hospitality was the sin. So that text has nothing to do with homosexuality, unless you want to perhaps say that it gives an indication that practicing homosexuality was normative in some places in society. Sometimes people use Romans 1, but that text is about priests having some priests having some odd behaviors, and the text even ends with this quote: "Therefore you have no excuse, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on another, you condemn yourself." And then sometimes people use 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 1 Timothy 1:10 because these have 2 Greek words that only in 1958 ever started getting translated as homosexuals. But that's not an accurate translation for either of those words. And the point of those texts is not to provide a list of don't do rules, but to encourage people to be full of faith. So I suggest to you that the Bible is silent on homosexuality as we understand it today. But I've learned something about my years in teaching Bible. On any issue like this, a hot topic, you cannot change someone's mind by making a logical, reasoned argument. Research shows us that on these tough issues, and we see it the same with gay marriage, that reasoned arguments don't change people's minds or hearts. In fact, reasoned arguments often have the result of the other person becoming more entrenched in their own ideological stance. Minds and hearts, the research shows, are changed by appeals to love and by appeals to fairness. And really, Bill Johnson said it well in his ordination paper many years ago. He said, quote, "The struggle in the church is not about opening minds, but about opening hearts. The only way hearts really open is through personal interaction. And the only way personal interaction can happen is if people are willing to place themselves in relationship with someone who is different from themselves." That's what you're trying to do here at Elmhurst. We can see this happening in our world today, and we should be encouraged. The key, it seems to me then, is for us all to become engaged. This is not about those of us who are LGBT or Q. It is about those of us who are heterosexual as well. We should all be speaking on this issue, and when I say this issue, I'm not just talking about homosexuality or gay marriage. I'm talking about the fullness of human sexuality. When we begin celebrating human sexuality of and for all people. Bill Johnson's life is a call to action, Again, from his ordination paper, quote, "It would have been much easier and much more expedient to remain silent. But I do not believe the call to discipleship is a call to expediency," end quote. Often the church has been on the wrong side of history, but the UCC, with the courage, integrity, and action of Bill Johnson, got itself on the right side of history. And we continue this work, all of us, together. The United Church of Christ continues to work toward the ideal of radical inclusion in extravagant welcome. I think of the remarkable pastoral letter of Paul Sherry in 1998, a letter drafted with the help of Bill Johnson, entitled "Now No Condemnation." That work continues in the United Church of Christ. And the two seminaries represented here today, Pacific School of Religion and Chicago Theological Seminary, both have centers for LGBTQ studies, both have active faculty working on these issues in theology, Bible, ethics, and worship. And Elmhurst College is leading the way among undergraduate institutions, a shining light for all to see, working together for justice and mercy. We are, and all should be, in partnership, and we should continue in the Bill Johnson way to be courageous about that partnership. Thank you.
The man left an empty podium. Well, I just want to say that my word of gratitude also for being here. Almost all of my wife's family was educated at Elmhurst, and I'm finally gaining ground in the family for having come here today. And to Bill for starting that wonderful 3 steps of Elmhurst, Pacific School of Religion, and Eternity. I think. The changing nature of theological education can be portrayed in many ways. When Bill came to seminary, there were about 10% of the student body who were female. And now in most of the mainline seminaries, it would be more like 63% to 65%. A much more diverse student body. But at the time that he came to seminary, there was a long history of not really dealing with any form of sexuality. There had been gay and lesbian members of the faculty and certainly in the student body and throughout the institution for long periods of time, probably all the way back to the origins of the seminary. But it was a taboo. It was not dealt with. There was a female professor in the 1950s who the president kept trying to find her a date, a male date, until there was that conversation in the office. The person I live with is not my sister, is not my aunt. She is not a lifelong friend. She is my partner. But those kinds of conversations were either very rare or did not take place at all. The understanding of homosexuality up until the end of the 1800s was that everybody who was born by nature was heterosexual. So if you were practicing any form of homosexuality, then you were expressing a bent will or an abnormality. And it was not until really the 20th century that, with the gifts of science and theologians and many others, began to understand that there is, in God's fullness of nature and creation, a great wealth and diversity of people who love differently and who are different in thousands of other ways, but are part of the blessed creation. In the case of the church, in and around ordination, Bill was the first to, at that time, to come forward and to take the mantle of responsibility upon his shoulders to say that he had experienced the call of God. No one can generalize how that call takes place, but there have been generations and generations of people who felt called out of their particular context and circumstances to serve God and humanity in the form of the vocation of ministry. In our tradition of the United Church of Christ, as in other traditions, it's not only that individual's sense of call, that individualistic experience, but it also needs to be confirmed by the larger body of Christ, by the church, by the community around you. And so it was not only Bill's coming to grips with his identity and his call, but the opportunity for the larger church also to weigh in, to discern his fitness for ministry. And the answer, as you might have expected, was divided. But a majority on that day did cast their vote of authenticity and confidence in him. The individual, when they move forward in courage and with the face of the community, leads to several things. One is resistance. That is, it awakens resistance. And there were many enemies and many carping critics and many demeanors and dehumanizers that this generated. But there also, it's a magnet which attracts the passions and the sense of commitment of those who have seen an injustice attempted to be done. In the life of the seminary, it was a staging into many other pitched battles, which included decisions in 1980 to welcome same-sex, same-gender partners into housing, or to hire gay and lesbian, transgender, bisexual faculty, to have persons welcomed into the Board of Trustees and into the staffing. And it's a process that all of us who are either gay and lesbian or our allies are called to take responsibility for creating those next steps. Moved into the life of the church. You may think of the United Church of Christ as a terribly progressive denomination. I just spent 8 years in Pennsylvania, and there's beachheads still being worked on in that territory. But out of all of the 5,500 United Churches of Christ, it's only 20% approximately that have become open and affirming. And the others, the 80%, are either have avoided it, are resistant to it, have undermined it. And so what I'm trying to suggest is that all of us who consider ourselves leaders in whatever setting and vocation we find ourselves have work to do. There are issues about adoption, there are issues about inheritance, there are issues about housing, and rather partners can share in certain kinds of mortgage structures. There's issues of marriage. It's endless. And one of the things that I love about this night and honoring you, Bill, is that it reminds us that not only the beginning of a journey, but that the many roads that must still be walked with people of good faith and good heart. And so I look at many of the things that happened at the seminary. There's now, as Alice mentioned, there's a Center for Lesbian and Gay Studies in Religion and Ministry. They have Latino-Latina roundtables, African-American roundtables, Asian and Pacific Islander roundtables, because we've learned over the years that the issues around gay rights and so forth are also contextual and operate differently in different human communities. So it's a complex undertaking, and it needs the leadership of all of us to have another day 40 years from now when we will celebrate major accomplishments. I commend Elmhurst. My family thanks you. My wife thanks you for the work you're doing and the leadership that you're expressing. Dr. Ray, thank you.
I have the dubious honor of following two very articulate and very moving presenters, and I would like to extend my personal thanks to President Hunt and President Potterveld for being with us this evening and for contributing all that you have to the discussion and for your close association with Elmhurst College, reminding us that we don't do this alone. Biblical studies and theology is not done in a social vacuum, as we all know. What is the social context for understanding the significance of Bill Johnson's decision to seek ordination as a gay man in 1972? And what is that context today for understanding our celebration of him? How is it possible we can do this at a remove of 40 years? I'd like to make a few remarks that are associated in part with my own training, which is in the philosophy of Foucault, and to speak a bit about the profound effect that he's had on queer theory. And I'll also allude to changes in the law that bear on understanding Bill in 1972, forward, and today. So, as President Potterveld said, the scene about and around homosexual conduct, as we would call it, was one of pathology through the late 19th century and the early 20th century. Homosexuality was a site of illness, and it was viewed as such. Homosexual studies were done not just in conjunction with rising institutions of psychology and psychiatry, but it was truly, in part, by deploying a discourse around this thing called the homosexual that they gained credibility in scientific circles, taking an object of knowledge in the way other sciences had already received and created their own. Similarly, in the law, homosexual acts were crimes. Crimes. What happens when we internalize these views? Of course, we get a picture of someone as a sick person and a criminal. It focuses, in the major institutions, the focus is on cures and rehabilitation. On the other side of the street, you could say normative heterosexuality and the law-abiding citizen are the standards by which behavior is measured. I think that's really the picture that I take away through the 1950s and into the 1960s, one that's highly dominated by the great institutions of our time, the law, medicine, particularly at its height, psychology and psychiatry. And then came June 28th, 1967, known to many of you, I'm sure, as the date of the Stonewall riots. The Stonewall riots represented an insurrection, Foucault would say, of subjugated knowledges. This taking to the streets from a bar in New York by a group of gay men and transgender persons, transvestites, attacking police violently, uprising, was something that had never been seen before. The insurrection of these subjugated knowledges represented a collective and individual rejection of the normative model of sexuality and legality, and in their place, we had something I'd call the counter-discourse of what ultimately became known as acting up. At the same time, think about it, we saw in the 60s the rise of identity politics, which can't be underestimated. Identity politics, as I understand it put simply, is taking on the form of you are X and I am not X. There were lots of non-X's, right? Identity politics that functions in this way is dialectical. I am something that you are not, and you are something that I am not. And I am not that as long as you are what you are. It was confrontational, and it was widely dispersed across many professional fields. The lesbian gay movement, also, at this time, I see is grounded in this concept of the natural. The argument over homosexuality was over whether homosexuality was natural or not. The fights about this naturalness often took the fight over equal rights. So I put this together around this time, recalling that Bill was ordained in 1972. And I see in the social environment bill claiming the dignity of Christian ministry for homosexual persons. Highlights in his work the social forces, the relations of power and knowledge, the creation and the conditions of serious discourses, and what counts as an acceptable practice. All of these were at work in his decision. Within it, behind the scenes, lending legitimacy to his action. These actions did not, however, result from a determination in his environment. I think it's very important to think about Bill and his achievement in 1972 as the vindication of the role of agency. And again, President Potterville alluded to that. Agency is so important, it's so difficult to understand in the context of a world that sees itself as subject to the throes of deep forces of one kind or another, or deep internal mechanisms in individuals working themselves out. And yet, here was Bill, an agent for change in an age of strong identity politics, where one was either gay or Christian, but not both. I see his gesture as, among many things, a rejection of that bipolarity. He dared to say that one could be both. Think of that. One could be both. So here's three things that I see emerging from this apropos bill. I see, Bill, your standing for ordination was a creative act. You were imaginatively transcending this bipolarity. It takes an act of imagination to see that. It's easy to see it as something that is impossible in the terms of the discourse of the day, but you imaginatively saw a way of transcending that and affirming it. It's also a political act. You claim the right to exercise ecclesial power, to stand within a church community among other believers, and to take a leadership role, but also to stand as one of authority. A brave act, finally. It's a brave act, if you think about it, in this sense. In 1972, there was not a thick social context that would support his decision. I mentioned before, how is today different than then? Today, look around you. Look at this thick social context of people that are so affirming of the life that you've lived. In 1972, I would dare say it was quite different. It was a trapeze act of swinging out there and hoping there was enough of reality out there that you could grab hold of it. So it was quite brave. Let me contrast that just very briefly with another person whom I admire. That was the Catholic scholar John McNeill, writing about the same time. For John McNeill, also making many of the arguments that theologians at that time made in favor of homosexual persons, standing also as Christians. For McNeill, there was no trapeze that he caught hold of, I think. He was eventually driven out of his ministry, as were so many other people at that time, but not Bill. Let me take a brief look with you at the legal environment at that time. In 1986, moving forward, Bowers v. Hardwick, I'm sure many of you know that Bowers held that there was no right to consensual homosexual sodomy. And that was just the terms they used. And the basis was that there was no right to privacy for consensual sexual acts, at least homosexual acts. That was a long tradition of opposition to such acts in Western religion and culture. In 1973, however, the APA, the American Psychological Association, stated that homosexuality is not a mental disorder. The tide was beginning to turn a bit within the authoritative discourses of the day. 1980s and 1990s saw the AIDS crisis, which we cannot forget in this context, which is so much a subject of ministry. It struck the gay male population of the first world and accelerated collective action against government policies that failed to prioritize research and treatment of AIDS. AIDS stimulated legal reforms to give partners equal access to loved ones impacted by HIV. It was, I think, perhaps the height of identity politics. It was the Reagan years. The moral majority was at its height. Divisions were profound and deep within the institutions of our society. But the crisis also moved lesbian gay community members to coalition building with other progressive groups. I also want to note to you the important theoretical work in the 1980s and 1990s that shouldn't be ignored. There was the queer challenge to assumptions of some of the lesbian gay movement's beliefs. To put briefly, the queer movement challenges essentialism, the notion that things have at bottom some definable, perduring essence through time. It's very important to understand that that is a stand that is counter to historical forces, and it gives one, if one understands the essence of something, a privileged political position to speak from. Queer theory challenged natural and unnatural as useful categories for significant change. You may remember, many of you, Audre Lorde's famous statement, "The master's tools can never dismantle the master's home." Natural and unnatural are terms par excellence of the master's house. The philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, the interpreter of Aristotle, is a very powerful force, not just within theology, but within our society. And while I think it's very tempting to fall into language of natural and unnatural and claim, apropos gay experience, that it's natural, is that really the best long-term strategy to take? Because it does wed one to a certain notion of human beings as possessing essential traits, essential ahistorical traits. Queer theory contested that. Finally, it's important to note that in the 80s and 90s, we saw the rise of social constructivism. This notion that we create our worlds. I think that goes hand in hand with the kind of agency that Bill was demonstrating back in 1972. Social constructivism, I think, creates a role for agency, a role for action over and against established forces. I think that what we're seeing today, now, is a world in which law, medicine, the military, as well as theory, may be making a move away from normative heterosexuality. Is that happening? What's happening in our society that allows this kind of acceptance broadly within these disciplines to occur? I wonder, has our understanding of women changed so radically that this would be possible? And if so, what is taking its place? I think a broader view of human flourishing that is more comfortable with sex in general is prevalent because it doesn't set a single standard or any standard for sexual conduct. We must ask, are we really moving away from essentialism today and talk about nature, or are we just expanding the category of nature to include those once on the outside, which, if you think about it, preserves the category of the unnatural as the other? How do we remove the other from our language? Does language of nature and the unnatural help us do that? And who is it that does this? Who is this we that is taking these steps? It's certainly not those who are too conventionally referred to as the far right. So what is the task for religion in this social, legal, medical, political, theoretical context? I think perhaps it is to retrieve for a new generation those aspects of its tradition that are generative of freedom and self-expression, maximize loving relationships, and with clear eyes understand that power is ubiquitous, and our only choice is to speak and live prophetically and bravely, one might say queerly, to oppose systems and people that pursue normalizing agendas, on the one hand, or to collude in some way with them. But are we not all part of these systems of domination? We must be careful in believing what it is we can achieve. I think Reinhold Niebuhr, that most hopeful of skeptics, would surely agree with Michel Foucault when Foucault said this: "The strategic adversary is fascism, the fascism in us all, in our heads, in our everyday behavior, the fascism that causes us to love power, to desire the very thing that dominates and exploits us." If you substitute sin for fascism, I think you have Niebuhr's point of view exactly. In short, is the task for those of us who embrace a religious tradition to act like Bill Johnson, who decades ago set us the example of a life well lived, without recourse to essences, religious or secular, or recourse to the dividing talk of what is natural and unnatural, and demonstrating what real agency can be, rejecting the notions of both agency operating in a void and agency determined by external forces to oneself. On this basis, I offer these thoughts about the contribution that Bill has made and the conditions for the reality of our conversations today about his achievements. The world truly has changed. The major institutions of our lives have changed appreciably, and it's because of these shifts and all these discourses and all these practices that we're able to stand here today and celebrate what Bill has done. We are that trapeze. We are those people to whom you come to, and we recognize you for what you have done. And I think that is worth celebrating. So in celebrating you, Bill, I think we are also celebrating a world in which we are moving beyond some of the assumptions that made problematic the courageous gesture that you took in 1972. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite our two other panelists to come and have a seat on the couch. Bill, if you'd like to join, we're going to have a brief conversation, but I think mostly we'd like to get your questions, comments from the audience. So be thinking about what you'd like to ask, and we'd be delighted to have you join in that conversation. So if you would like to come forward. See, I think this is on. Great. I'm going to start with one question of my own that I would direct to all the panelists here. That is, how do you see the future going forward of LGBT people in these churches, these manifold churches that we have here? Are you hopeful? Are you not hopeful? What complexities do you see that we have before us to move to a world in which these kind of courageous acts will be embraced?
I'll just make some reference. Robert Putnam has a book called American Grace that's out, which is the most widely researched kind of a religion landscape of American religion. And one of the things he notes is that among the millennials, those in the 20s and 30s, there is a reaction that's quite pronounced of negative reaction to the strong positions of the evangelical church around issues of gender and sexuality. And so even though they may adopt other conservative values, that is one area that they seem to move through and beyond. And they actually have a negative reaction oftentimes to the kind of homophobic messages of the church. So, you know, if enough of us old geezers die off, then presumably, at least in America or American society, there is a growing sense that this is not a moral problem or a social problem or a personal problem, and there's a greater latitude of acceptance and generosity and affirmation than might have been true of previous generations in the church. So,
thank you. Anyone else would like to speak to that point?
I do just want to say I'm hopeful, not only on the front that Reese was just talking about, but also that we're starting to see people talk about the fullness of human sexuality for everyone and the complexity of human sexuality. And we're starting to see instances where we are even talking about sex in church, which is really wonderful. And on the biblical front, I'm hopeful. I think that scholarship is moving in the direction, and people in laity in churches are moving in the direction of looking at the human sexuality, the complexity of human sexuality that the Bible talks about. Just read Song of Songs out loud sometime, or just with a friend. I mean, have a great time with it. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you.
I like the with the friend part a lot. I'm thinking about a couple of things. One is my friend Rachel, who gave me a place to stay when I was in seminary and had to travel to my fieldwork position. And I had to go down on a Saturday night, and I always stayed at Rachel's house, the home of Rachel and Ed. And when I came out at seminary and it looked like there was a fight brewing over my ordination, Rachel decided to move her church membership to the church where I was seeking to be ordained, to the local church where I had my membership. And she said, if there's going to be a fight, I want to be a part of it. Talk about agency. Here was a woman who, understood that she had a role to play in creating justice. A few years later, after I was ordained, Rachel filed for divorce from her husband. This came as a great surprise to me. And when I spoke to her about it, she said, until you did what you did, I didn't think that I had a right to be happy in my sex life. And she said, we have had a dead marriage for about 35 years, and I'm getting out of it, and I'm going to find the right man for me. And I was delighted because she had appropriated the gospel of freedom for her own life, and she was taking action to create for herself the relationship that she knew she deserved. The other thing that I think about are all the gays and lesbians and even bisexual people and transgender people who have come out to their families and their congregations and have become witnesses for their own truth without shame, asserting who they are in the community. If I have any hope for the future, it's that will continue to happen, and that through that personal interaction and those relationships that get created in that context of truth and freedom, more and more people's prejudice will die.
Thank you. That stimulates another thought I'd like to share as a question for all of you. It's kind of a counterposition. On the one hand, we often hear that the mainline churches are in decline, and that's sociologically true, demographically true. It's increasingly the case that memberships in the mainline churches, Protestant and Catholic, are declining. And if that is a proxy for their influence in society, it raises the question for me, what is the position of a prophetic voice around LGBT issues within those mainline churches? On the one hand, you might say that it is the voice crying in the wilderness, that increasingly there's no one left to hear that prophetic call. On the other hand, it might be a vivifying call, a renewing call, that would bring exactly the kind of relevance that may be the cause of the decline in the first place. Which of those, either or both, or something else? What do you see the relationship of mainline churches to this particular witness to LGBT folk having?
I think it's a call to authenticity in the faith. I don't know. It's the prophetic voice in the church today is one that, in some sense, it invites members of the body of Christ to be true to the essential imperatives of the gospel. It's a calling back. It's a call. Maybe it's a revelation in the new context, but there's always a need for people who are going to be prophetic and say, we're not really Christians yet. We may be Christians, but we have not perfected the faith in our own lives and in the community. It amazes me that there are people who call themselves Christians who really don't give a damn about the poor. I don't know how you can do that, personally. I just don't understand that kind of, that's not prophetic work.
Thank you. Alice?
Just a brief comment that I think the change is coming, the vibrancy is going to come from the source of the prophetic voice. And I think where before the prophetic voice came mainly from the leadership of the church, it seems to me that we're moving to a place where the prophetic voice comes from everyone in the church. Everyone in the church is a minister. It's like Rachel's agency in speaking became prophetic. And so in that way, it's a call for everyone in the church to be prophetic, by our lives, by who we speak up for, by when we're not silent. So I'm hoping it'll change that way.
Thank you. There hasn't been, churches that have become open and affirming, that's the UCC terminology for it. There has not been a really good exhaustive study of what has happened to those congregations. So, I go from place to place visiting churches, so I have ad hoc evidence. And I would say that, there is some research that suggests that at least congregations that have a more diverse population in their congregation, that's one of the markers of revitalization and of growth. But my impression is that churches that have become open and affirming have not only attracted gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered people, but there's a whole wealth of people who are families of those individuals or who are in the network with those individuals. And most of them, it's such an important issue that they are unwilling to be in a congregation that takes a negative position. So there's been growth, and I would say it's one of the markers of revitalization, certainly not the only one. But you're still talking about relatively few congregations in any denomination that have publicly, come to that sort of affirmation.
Thank you. I'd like to have one more question of the panel, and then we can open it up for questions from the audience. We've been largely talking here about the transformation of the Western understanding of sexuality, the vicissitudes of medical, legal, philosophical, biblical interpretations of it. But we're increasingly in an interfaith world, and we take pride in that. Are we able to conduct a conversation that is, to use Bill's word, authentic, with folks from other traditions that may not be where we are on these issues, that may not even speak from the same set of warrants and authorities as we do on these issues? How do we address these issues already dividing the Christian churches in an interfaith context? What's the first move that we have to take in that? Reese, how would you like that?
Well, there are, if you move on, within the United States, there are Unitarians and there are Jewish circles that are very, very far down the road in terms of accommodating a more sex-positive viewpoint, including same-gender attraction and so forth. There's a lot surfacing around Islam, for instance. There are, as you would expect, there are very conservative and strict rules in some cultures that are Islamic about sexual contact, sexual approach, and you would find in those contexts a pretty strong condemnation and even sometimes strong punishments of people who are expressing that behavior. We have so many issues to work through, and I'm sure that that's not going to be the first thing that gets first nature of conversation. There are Asian cultures that are not sex negative, that are sex positive cultures. Hinduism and forms of Buddhism have had a much wider understanding of the dynamics of sexuality as an expression of the sacred. But it starts, I think, with conversations. There's been some in the World Parliament of Religions has broached some of these subjects, and I think we're just at sort of the cusp or the beginning point of dealing with some of that, evolving. I haven't gone to the Roman Catholic Church, but I could, but I won't.
Just want to piggyback on what Reese was saying, to say that used to be when we thought about interfaith dialogue, it was a monologue, and we were talking to someone, and I think we've moved a great distance to interfaith engagement, and so it seems to me whether we're dealing with a difficult topic, challenging topic with somebody with whom we disagree, either in our own faith tradition or in another faith tradition, that the first thing that has to happen is relationship. And I think it goes back, Bill, to what you were saying, is that the best way for transformation on LGBTQ issues to happen is to come out of relationships that you build with someone, to become personally involved. And I think it's the same in an interfaith engagement context.
I was going to say that I think not everyone can do it. Not everyone can be part of those conversations. But listening is an extremely important part of it. I also would like to say that because a person challenges teachings of a particular religion, their own religion, doesn't mean that they are not a person of faith. And that's a really important distinction to make, because if change is going to happen for those LGBTQ people who are in pain because of the teaching of their religion, they need to know that they are not going to become a faithless person if they challenge those teachings and claim a new understanding of the historic faith that they are a part of.
Yeah, great point. And I think that's a great springboard, if we may, for moving to the audience and questions there. And Scott, are you going to be working?
Ready to go, sir.
Okay, thank you.
If you could, I'm going to come over here and then I'll come back to you. Introduce yourself, please, and frame your comment question, sir.
My name is Morris Floyd, and I was thinking just before you got to this question about the other piece of the context here, which is a global context. And for example, in the denomination that I know well, there's great concern about the impact of the global parts, that is the non-North American parts of the United Methodist Church, and the impact of conservative thinking on this issue on the decision-making in the U.S. church. That is the adverse impact because of the way that particular denomination operates. But it goes beyond the denomination, of course, and I just think it's worth thinking about this global context, which is partly about other religions, but it's also about all of these other versions, if you want, of Christianity, which take place in a social context much different than the United States.
Great, thank you very much.
I'm Carrie Maxwell from Windy City Times, and I was wondering if any of you are involved with Faith in America, and if so, what is your involvement, and what any other comments you have about that?
Do you at least like to explain what Faith in America is? I could take a shot, but I've...
It's a group of individuals that are faith-based, of course, and they, like yourself, Reverend Johnson, you work to help others understand what it's like to be Christian in America and also be LGBTQ positive. And I know that Shelley Wright is involved with that now, that she's come out as a Christian and a country singer and a lesbian. So I thought wanted to know.
I'm not involved in it.
I'm not, but a number of our faculty members are involved with Human Rights Campaign, which does similar type work to Faith in America.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to ask a group of shall I say, leaders in the United Church of Christ, which is the church of my background, although I'm not and haven't been for many years a person of faith, but I have been a person very much concerned for justice issues. I am a gay man. Last Saturday, I was at an anti-war protest in Chicago. There were some 2,000 people there. And I've been active in the anti-war movement for many, many years. And I remember many years ago, Bill, at the time that you were ordained and before, participating in anti-war movements when U.S. aggression was occurring in Vietnam, not in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places as it is today. And at that time, and some of you may remember this, there were many persons from the Christian faith tradition who were outspoken in their opposition to that war. Martin Luther King, of course, being a prominent example. I've been aware in recent years, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean I've heard a deafening silence from the churches on the war issue, and I'm wondering if you agree that this is the case, and if you disagree with it, I'm sure you'll tell me that as well. But I would be interested in brief responses from at least some of the panelists on this issue. Thank you.
I just want to say this about me. Yes, I went to seminary. I graduated from this lovely institution in 1968, and I went to seminary, and some of my classmates went to Vietnam. And anti-war work was very vital in Berkeley at that time. I remember there were days when the seminary classes would just empty because all the students rushed over to the University of California to join the demonstration of the day. There came a moment in my life, being a multitasker and being a person who cares about a great many issues, that I had to make a decision to focus my energies on that particular sphere of influence where I felt like I could actually influence things. And anti-war work is something that I have a great empathy for. It's something that I don't do because the work that I have done and the work that I continue to do for my own people takes a great deal of energy. And for me, it was a matter of focus and understanding the sphere of influence. You know, the church was a sphere of influence where I could actually make some change happen. You know, and I left the broader society, even with regard to gay and lesbian concerns, in the hands of other people. So I just wanted to say that for me. But I admire your work, and there's a big part of me that wants to go downtown. You know, I want to be in the Loop. I want to be in Occupy Cleveland. I want to be in New York City right now. There's a huge part of me that wants to do that, but it's not something I will do.
I mean, I don't know if you want me to talk about it at the national level. I mean, I think you're right. It's been rather mute. There was a lot of work done in the seminaries I've been at on Darfur, but that's more, it's not about a war that we're the aggressor. It's about a situation of responding to humanity in severe degrees of need and so forth. Students are very much involved in the kinds of global justice issues and wars. But I think you're right that in terms of denominational response, there's been much more attention to things like Palestine and Israel and some of the other traditional Near Eastern sites than there has been to Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq was certainly weighed in on, but that was much stronger than what's going on currently. I think you're right. I think we've gone also through a period of just sort of numbness because of the number of catastrophic events that people have been trying to respond to. I mean, that's no excuse because the issues are stark, and they're bound to come up more in this election cycle as well, I think, as people talk about what the future is and the cost of those wars. But I agree with you. It's been, if you place it to something like Vietnam, it's very muted, and I think that's the right characterization.
Just a brief moment. I can't give you the exact citation of where it is, but I have seen material from the National Church certainly on Iraq and on Afghanistan and Pakistan. And you're right, relatively speaking, it may not be as much, and that could be a sign of the times, or it could be a sign of redirected energy. I don't know, but I have seen it.
The National Conference of Bishops for the Catholic Church has been outspoken on the war. Direct, has been very strong on saying what we're doing as a country is wrong, and has been very direct from the Roman Catholic Church. So there are voices out there. We have a question over here, Dr. Ray, and I know it's getting late, and this is a little after 9, but it's a fruitful time, and it's an important time. But if you have questions, please get thinking on them. Sir.
Thank you. John Moed-Schiedler, Elmhurst College, class of 1959. President Hunt, thank you for your most excellent, succinct synopsis of how the Bible has been misused, abused, misinterpreted, etc. So I've been familiar with that. But I have a very good friend whom I've known for over 40 years, whom I respect, who is on the faculty of a major graduate school, who takes the position that whether the Hebrew scriptures, Hebrew Aramaic scriptures, or the Christian scriptures had ever been written, had they not been written, we would still have the homophobia that we have today. That's very difficult for me to swallow, because I would hazard the guess that Christians and Jews who are homophobic are so because of their having been, quote, told it by the Bible.
Thank you, because you raise a really interesting point for me. I'm teaching a class online this semester called Biblical Interpretation in Contemporary Context, and we're having this magnificent conversation about what we bring to our interpretation of the Bible. So I've asked the students in the class, what are your underlying assumptions? It's easy for me to pick out President Ray's underlying assumptions. He believes this, this, and this. But when I have to name my own, it's not so easy. And so we've gotten into this conversation about what comes first, the beliefs or the Bible. And I wonder, and it's scary to think about this, but I wonder if it isn't the case that our beliefs always come first. And that somebody told me at one point, the Bible says this, is based on a particular ideology or theology. There's something underpinning that then we use the Bible to speak about. It's a chicken and egg question. And one of the reasons why I love studying the Bible and why I want to encourage people to study and learn. Go learn Hebrew, go learn Greek. Get in there, and because the more I know, the more I don't know. That helps.
Other questions, please. Sir.
Hi, my name is Jerome Adams, and my question, I believe, is for Dr. Hunt, but anyone who wants to chime in, and I'm addressing it to Dr. Hunt as a member of an African-American congregation, and the African-American church at large on the issues of LGBT and Q people, and I hear you all talk about such progressiveness in mainline churches, particularly UCC, but my experience in African American churches at large is that we are so far behind when it comes to dealing with those issues. And I gauge that on my own congregation, which at one time, as early as the 20s, was open and welcoming to gays and lesbians, and in fact was the only place that they could go and worship and be welcomed, but has maintained through that time a don't ask, don't tell culture. And that is still the culture in many, many African American churches, and not so much, and based on what they bring in biblical assumptions, not so much what they believe about the Bible, but what somebody else believes about the Bible is what is generally driving it. Where do you see the African American church on these issues? Is there any hope?
You're going to put a white girl on the spot like that? I do have to say that there, I would agree if as a generalization with how you have characterized what I know of as black church. There are some exceptions, even in the great city of Chicago. There are some exceptions about that, but in African American churches, it might be don't ask, don't tell, but we sure appreciate the choir and the choir director. So amen. So I heard recently Dr. Brad Braxton speak at the Jeremiah A. Wright lecture in downtown Chicago about telling the truth in the black church. And what he called the black church to do is to just be honest about human sexuality. And not just for LGBTQ people to be honest about human sexuality, but let's all of us be honest about human sexuality and about our own sexual practices. Let's talk about God of love and God of inclusion, and let's remember how people ostracized African Americans at one time, and and women, which also the black church has some issues with. Let's talk about what has happened in our history that can help us be honest about, and that human sexuality is a gift from God and a pleasure, and we ought to grow in the fullness of that. I chickened out by resorting to Dr. Brad Braxton to answer your question, but I do believe that those conversations are starting to happen, and there is hope.
I think your question is linked to the previous question in this way. The previous questioner posed a question that could, I'm going to reinterpret it, if you don't mind. Is the prejudice toward same-gender loving people based on the Bible? You know, for a long time I've thought it's not. You know, if the Bible had never been written, the prejudice would still be there. Because of the way you characterize the black church is don't ask, don't tell. Well, don't ask, don't tell translates into silencing and invisibility. And it's the silencing and invisibility throughout history, up until recent history, that has enabled people to believe things that simply weren't true. And that's still going on in many places today. And so I think on the National Coming Out Day, I really have to say, coming out publicly to all of your family and friends and co-workers and neighbors and church members is really, really important. You know, the visibility, there is no power like the visibility of one's own life, and the truth of one's own experience, and the willingness to not shut up. So whenever I hear "Don't ask, don't tell," the military simply didn't want to see these people, and they simply didn't want to hear about it, because then they'd have to deal with it. So I say, get vocal, get visible, get free.
Just we have had for like the last 18 years, people will come out of African American congregations. They'll come with that viewpoint or set of attitudes. But what happens is that they then go through 3 or 4 years of a very intense relationship to people of all kinds. Some of them are gay and lesbian. In class or out of class, they begin to hear stories. They develop personal relationships. My experience is that at the end, they've come to a very different sort of discernment and assessment inside. The hope is that they'll become bearers, in whatever congregations they serve, of that discovery, self-discovery. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure for some they become influential. For others, maybe they subvert that and go back in order to succeed in the congregation that's resistant. But I mean, it's really going on, and it's part of the educational process for the most part.
Thank you. As we wrap up, I'd like to thank again all of you for coming out tonight, as it were. And I also would like specifically to thank our faculty. I want to thank you all for coming forward with the proposals and the excitement and the energy around an academic dimension to what we do here in the college around LGBTQ issues. Thank you, thank you. Final point, let me give the last word to Bill Johnson. Bill, would you like to leave us with any words?
I know this person so well, I know that Scott Matheny is actually going to have the last word. But as but as regards the four of us, thank you very much, Alan. I want to say thank you all for coming. Thank you for sharing in this very important evening in my life. I am so appreciative of the appreciation of what I did and the way it's been framed this evening. For me, it's like hearing about ancient history. Because so much has happened in all of these nearly 40 years since that time of struggle. But I'm so inspired. It's such a different world, and I often think of the gay and lesbian clergy in not only in the United Church of Christ, but in many, many, many denominations now, as my grandchildren, and pretty soon my great-grandchildren, and hope that the opening of that door, the changing of that tradition that I had a small part in making happen, has not only given people careers, but has expanded the pastoral care of the church, has expanded the understanding that people have of the gospel, has expanded the capacity of people to claim their own freedom and to be the people that God created them to be. And I am always grateful that I had the opportunity to do what I did.
And with that, we should thank both Bill and all of our team up here. Join me, please, in thanking them. And for all of us to thank each other. Thank you all. There's refreshments, but as we bring Jim Creshaw up, who is going to offer a gift of song to send us forth, and then I'm going to invite us all to stand and to sing the alma mater. And so I'm going to need some help from some of you, including Bill. Thank you all for coming. And Jim, He's a graduate of the college, has studied all over Europe, and is now at the Lyric Opera as one of the stars and coming into his own. Sure.
Somebody hold me too close. Somebody hurt me too deep. Somebody sit in my chair and ruin my sleep and make me aware of being alive, being alive. Somebody need me too much. Somebody know me too well. Somebody pull me up short and put me through hell and give me support for being alive. Make me alive. Make me alive. Make me confused. Mock me with praise. Let me be and vary my days, for alone is alone, not alive. Somebody crowd me with love. Somebody force me to care. Somebody let me come through. I'll always be there, as frightened as you, to help us survive.